Yay! We are live. We are live. We are live. I always like to say that in the beginning. Um, so I actually was meant to remind everybody, but I'm sure people will have seen the flyer and they'll start joining us. But I think we can start the conversation. Those who join us will join us. And what is beautiful about this, Buhle, is it's going to live on the social media platform. So even if people are not joining us tonight, they'll always join us at a later point. But anyway, good evening if you're in South Africa. Good morning if you're in another part of the world. Hello to those that are going to watch this days and months and years after we have gone live. My name is Bongeka, and I am the author of this book, Thinking in Full Color, Multicolored Ideas for Conversation. Don't mind my scribbled up copy. That's my reference copy. But yeah, but really, the Full Color series conversations are inspired by my book, Thinking in Full Color. And the subtitle for the book is Multicolored Ideas for Conversations. And I always like to think of this series really as an extension of the conversations that I started in the book, and some really outside, because I really do believe that conversations are a bridge that enable us to see another person's world, that enables us to color the world with multi-layered perspectives. So I'm quite thoroughly excited about tonight's conversations, joined by an incredible gentleman that I'm so honored to be able to really break bread with tonight. And our conversation for tonight is, let's break bread, a curious inquiry into identity politics. What a topic. Dr. Buhle, how are you doing? Welcome to, I suppose, another installment of the Full Color Leader Series. How are you doing? How are you feeling tonight?
Hi, Bongeka. Thank you very much for having me today on your on this conversation. And I'm well, and I'm looking forward to, as you said, breaking bread with you. I'm very excited to see what comes up today, what unfolds for us in this conversation.
Absolutely. No, and it is quite an honor for me to, I suppose, I think if you recall, when I reached out to you about this, it was saying this is a topic that's been in my mind, and I'm not necessarily, and I think this is also for the audience context. We're not necessarily sitting from a posture of expert, but we're more sitting from a posture of curious students of the human condition, and also just curious students of very complex topics that one does not always arrive at easy or conclusive answers, and perhaps we might even have more questions than answers, but I think it's still necessary to get into such conversations and sow our own seeds or whatever ideas that might be out there. But maybe to start with, I mean, I'll also invite the audience, wherever they watch it from or listening from, to just, our topic is obviously about identity politics, but I think going to add a full color lens to it. So wherever you're joining us from, what's one word that comes to mind for you when you think of this idea around identity, right? I read a definition, and I want to read out three interesting definitions that I found when I was doing research for this topic. The first being, I think, what most of us would automatically link up to is identity is the fact of being who and what a person or thing is. Another one speaks to this idea about traits that make an individual unique. And this is often associated with the self-concept, self-image. But perhaps one of my favorite one is one's mental image of who they are. So Dr. Buhle, maybe to really start or kick us off today, I want you to start by first introducing yourself in the context of this idea around identity, and then talk to us about how would when you think of this topic around identity politics and a curious inquiry, particularly to it, what does that mean for you?
Yeah, thank you so much. So, by way of introduction, I suppose I should tell your audience that I have a PhD in social psychology and particularly looking at intergroup identities. So I happen to have studied that a little bit. And that was specifically about how people make identities or construct identities based on their group membership. That's what I was looking at specifically. And before that, I did a Master of Philosophy looking at intercultural and diversity studies. So that also has quite a bit of identity politics and identity construction work in it. So that's kind of a background that I have. And in a sense, to my mind, that's part of one of my previous lives, because I was doing that some years ago and then went on to lecture at UCT in the psychology department. So I bring some of that with me today. But another part of who I am now, and this is also kind of what we're talking about, changing
Yeah,
identities,
yeah,
um, and is that I work mainly as a life coach. And in that work, I have very strong leanings towards spirituality. And so a lot of how I think about who we are and what we are um, borrows, leans towards a sense of something that transcends our socially constructed identities as well, or how we draw from our sense of self from our group memberships or gendered memberships. So I think that that is something that I bring into this conversation. So insofar as what I think about identity politics, I often think about them as a story that we tell. It's a narrative. It's
mm,
something that we construct. It's something that we build up.
sure,
Um, and and for that reason, it's something that is not static.
sure,
It's not something that is fixed, although we may hold on to certain ideas or
yeah,
narratives, about where I
yeah,
come from, about my
yeah,
ethnic
sure,
identity, and we may hold on to those as kind of like abiding or standing ideas about who we are. But
yeah,
even those shift as well
yeah,
to some degree. So for me, identity is about storytelling. It's about the fact that we tell
sure,
stories. So I think of ourselves as biological beings, of course, but we're also not just biological beings. There are many other life forms that are based on biology or carbon-based life forms. But what also distinguishes us the most, I think, from other life forms, let's say animals, is that we tell stories
yeah,
about
yeah,
who we are, about what we want, about all these sort of things. So identity is something that is a story, and people go to wars about stories, about stories that have to do with
sure,
place, identities, all sorts of things. There's a whole conversation we could have about that. But essentially, it's just, for me, it comes down to storytelling.
sure, sure, sure. You know what is so profound about this idea around the stories we tell ourselves, right? I don't know how much of the of pop culture you might be in. And listen, not that I am a pop culture person, but I just remembered as you talking, one of the things that were probably bubbling in my mind that made me curious to even have this conversation around identity politics. I don't know if you know the young upcoming, well, she's no longer upcoming, I suppose she's an international star, or Tyler, right? Or I don't know her surname, but I know she's young. She's a South African. In South Africa, knowing the story and the historical context of our country, you would know that the categorization of race based on, what has happened through colonization and so forth was the category of white, Indian, colored, and then black African, right? Tyler goes to America. She's young. She's probably in, I don't know what, maybe she's 20 something. I think she sits in an interview. They ask the question, so what race are you? And obviously she's like, well, I'm colored. And she's received a tremendous amount of backlash from the African American community because again, the backlash is how dare she says that. It means she's not proud to be black. We are pro-black. We are black women. We support now. When you look at the social media trends, because obviously for me, not necessarily pop culture, but as a researcher, as a social scientist, I'm intrigued by the nuance of the stories, right? You have the South African colored community defending her, even the South African black community to say, America, South Africa is not black and white. You guys, it's white and black. To us, it's nuanced. Even within the black, you would know that Gumzulu, there's Tsonga, there's Venda, there's all of that. But I think it's the story again for me when I was reading and I was laughing because to the black Americans, this idea of blackness is a story, right? It's an identity that everybody is, and it's the reclaiming. I think after the Black Lives Movement, the reclaiming of black is incredible. That's why they all call themselves kings and queens. But to us, the story is much more nuanced. So, as a South African, Tyler saying that is not offensive because we get the story behind that. But I think, I think I'm emphasizing your point around these stories around I'm Zulu, I'm this, I'm that, become the politics that make us begin to clash on what it is to be a South African, a colored, a woman, a white person, right? And I'm curious, as maybe we dissecting this further around if because you've done a lot of work around the dimensions of as you've said of intergroup identities and obviously and I love what you said, the nimbleness to reshape, because I don't think that's an idea that is often confronted or shared with us, that you can actually reformat your identity. But I'm curious around if you've ever thought of explored this idea around the multi-dimensional layers of how our identities intersect. And what I mean by that is there's the physical component of identity, right? Where you can say Bongeka is a black or a Zulu woman because of my physical. But there's also the way people define themselves by the mental, right? Like, for example, we know that the world is now dominated by tech gurus, the Elon Musk and the Bill Gates. But I think I like what you started off about the spirituality. So for me, I'm curious about, have you ever, or what are your thoughts about the interface of the identity at the physical level, identity at the mental level, and identity at the spiritual level? And I'll tell you what resonates with me, but I wanted to hear what are your thoughts around that intersection, and if you've seen any patterns in society around that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. So maybe let me offer a metaphor to an attempt to respond to your question, and you must forgive me if I offer up a lot of metaphors. It's just the way that
No,
it
it's
helps me
cool.
think through things. So let's think of a kaleidoscope, right? What and what we can do at the kaleidoscope is tilt it around and get
Yeah.
different color spectrums, right? The different color spectrum. So let's think of identity as that, right? That it is something that is multi-dimensional. Yeah, it's a broad spectrum. So as you said, there's a physical aspect to it, the phenotypical aspect of identity. There's a mental one, there's a spiritual one, there's a gendered one, there's all these sort of things, and the sex and sexuality and so on and so forth. Now, the thing is, another thing that you'll have to think about is the context, the milieu within which a particular question or the question of identity is located, right? Because someone like, for example, the conversation you're talking about, Tyler, perhaps when I don't know her, I'm not like out there like that, but perhaps for her, that is something that is specifically activated because she is using her colored identity as a way of also not just reclaiming that, because the colored people themselves have been marginalized, caught between the blacks and the white. On the one hand, you're not white enough, on the other hand, you're not black enough, right? The politics of this country. So maybe you can use that to say, I'm colored. You can claim that identity as a strategic move again to say, I am here. Yes, I'm South African, but I want to, in a sense, look or focus on this perspective, on this kaleidoscope of colored identity. And that's perfectly fine, right? You can do that. In another context, let's say, for example, you get a colored athlete. So we've had some of them in the Olympics. What matters is it's not that they're colored. To us South Africans, it may matter. The colored people don't claim our colored, athlete. He's ours. But to the international stage, they're just South African, or whatever the situation may be. So the point that I want to make with this as well is that although on the surface of it being our kind of phenotypical features, or even cultural and social aspects of our identity, although they may appear to be at some level boundaries, but these boundaries are very porous. In other words, they can permeate each other. And you see the situation where someone, for example, who, let's say, stick with the colored, who may have a colored accent, but has gone to, or even a black person, but has gone to a school where they have learned to speak in a particular way. They have a particular inflection to their speech or accent, then we have particular names for those people because we feel that they are betraying their physicality. You're
Yeah.
not supposed to speak like this physically because you look like this. You're supposed to speak like this. So you begin to see that these things, when it comes to identity as well, what they have, which is important to remember, is that they always are gatekeepers of identity. So we're always policing identity at all times, right? And the gatekeepers, or sometimes the people who might be cultural icons, the so-called celebrities, whoever they may be,
Yeah.
or even depending on where you are, there are people who will be the gatekeepers, right? So I
Yeah.
think I'm just
Yeah.
going to leave it there for now, just to see how that resonates with you. But it's just the main point is really to say that the they are gatekeepers to identities, and where there may seem to be boundaries, those
Yeah.
boundaries are not as solid as sometimes as we like to make them appear. In fact, the fact that someone may want to impose how somebody
Yeah.
should be is itself is telling that that
Yeah.
boundary is not as is not as strong as we often like to think that it is.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by this idea of gatekeepers of identity. I'm curious, what do you think makes one or makes a group gatekeepers of identity? Because I'm already thinking of very many examples in my head right now. But what do you think that stems from? What's the root of that would make one say, "Mm-mm,
Yeah,
yeah, thingy,
yeah.
yeah."
I think that,
What do you think?
yeah. There could be a number of things so basically, I think that it comes from particular agendas, interests, or investments that people have, in particular, when people do that, when they gatekeep. And this is not only just in terms of our, the question of identity, in terms of like social identities we're talking about, maybe in terms of our personal
Yeah,
or as people. You see the same thing even in professions. There's a reason why
yeah.
people have to study what they need to study for as long as they need to get a license to become a psychologist or a doctor. That's gatekeeping, right? That's gatekeeping. People are saying because a doctor is an identity. In other words, it is a
Yeah,
way of
yeah,
it is a particular framework of telling a story about who you are through what you do
yeah,
and
yeah.
what you have studied, right? So for example, one of the things that I caught online to attempt to answer your question more pointedly recently is that this whole big hullabaloo about people on social media. I guess it's linked. One is the recent judgment that men can now take their wives' surnames. That has
Yeah,
caused an
yeah.
uproar, right?
Oh
I
my
think
goodness. Yeah.
particularly because a lot of men are outraged by this because there is something
Yeah,
invested in our identity as men that
yeah,
says that, you know, I take a wife and you become part of my identity.
But
You're
yeah,
coming into my framework.
yeah,
Now you're
yeah,
saying, I'm going to come into your framework. So
yeah.
it's a power play, right? There's the question of in
Mm,
culture and power play that is in there, and also control. Because
yeah.
now it means that it raises a question of who is the person who's controlling the narrative. If you're now moving into
Mm,
my framework instead of you, sorry, if I'm moving into your framework
yeah.
as a man instead of you moving into my, so who's in control here? So so that's one thing. There's an investment, there's an agenda, there's an interest in controlling the
Mm,
narrative there, right?
the
Other
one.
thing
Yeah,
would be some here in KZN in particular, I've seen men, Zulu men in particular, being upset that gay men are putting on these traditional attires.
yeah. Oh
It's a
yes,
similar
yes.
thing, right?
The
It's a
big thing,
similar,
yeah.
it's gatekeeping. And the
Yeah,
investment there, one might argue, is
yeah.
that
I saw
it's a
that.
question of what is a proper Zulu man. A proper
Yeah.
Zulu man is a heterosexual man,
Oh
and
God.
this attire is linked with
Mm,
power. It's a symbol of power. It is a symbol of royalty. And of course, power and
yeah,
royalty have nothing to do with being
yeah,
homosexual. So
yeah,
that's gatekeeping.
yeah, yeah. Sure. Oh my goodness. We could I thought of that example as well. The one that you, the latter one that you just made. But I think you really what's the English phrase? Hit. Yo, what's that English? You hit the nail.
The
What's the
nail on the
English?
head.
The nail on the head. Yes, yes, yes. Around that, and I think as you even like, sure, talking about the, it almost like you're obviously unpacking that. There's something that you said earlier about when you were introducing yourself, right? And I mean, I think I resonated with this. That, and I don't think it's an idea that a lot of people interface with. The idea that you can reformat your identity, because I think one of the questions I was going to ask, but I think you already answered them, was this idea that it is identity and by nature or by nurture, right? Or is a product of nature or by nurture. And I think for me, the older I get, of course, there's certain things biologically you're born with. Like, I'm a woman, I can change that, right? Like, I wasn't necessarily, well, you can now, but I don't prefer to change. I'm happy to be a woman, but the idea around, though, the identity that really shapes how you live your life from a soul, from a mental, I think it's born from through socialization. Because think about it, Buhle, when we arrive in the world, we literally are neutral. And then everybody starts putting layers. So if I'm born in KZN, the Zulus will tell me Umzulu. And everything that comes with this being Zulu. You're born in a Christian home, a Muslim home, the layers that come with that. You're a woman. How should a woman behave? So it's all these layers until you go on an awakening journey where you begin to recontract with yourself around, actually, I'm not sure about this, I'm not sure about that. And then the reason why I'm laying that framework or that foundation is you've been able to do that. And I'm curious, Uguti, as a psychologist, but not more than that, as a spiritual leader, as a coach, what are some of the tools that can enable a person, let's say a person who's even in a quote identity crisis? What are some of the tools that can help them retool themselves, reformat themselves, and go to the depths of who they really are and find an identity that is more authentic to who they are. So, what are some of the tools that they can do that you maybe you can share with us?
Yeah, thank you. So I think with the first thing, often a crisis is always a good stimulant or stimulus, right? To get somebody
Yeah.
to a point of even questioning, of wanting to raise questions about who am I? What am I? And
Mm.
so often something needs to happen in our lives. An incident happens, or maybe even age or aging does that, as we mature in life, whatever it may be. So I think the first thing in that is awareness, is something, and a
Mm.
sense of awareness that, you know what,
Mm.
I and I'm just gonna kind of speak here as if somebody is going through this, right? It's like I realize that a large part of who I am, or I've thought to be I am who I am, has come from other people. And because this is often the
Mm.
thing about socialization. Socialization is nothing more than being told who you are,
Mm.
what you should be, how you should be that. And that's where these gatekeepers we're
Mm.
talking about come in. So
Mm.
even without intending to, our primary environments, the home, the school, the church, the community, and all these places, what they are
Mm.
there for us, they are, and you see it even at universities, the different
Mm.
faculties and the different degrees, those are all programming us to see the world, to think about the world, and to think about ourselves in particular ways. So, in a sense,
Mm.
it's to have that awareness that I have been programmed. And here think of program not necessarily always as a negative thing, but it's to say that I've been programmed in the same way that
Mm.
research has shown
Mm.
that the first 7 years of life, for all of us, our brains are in the theta state wave. And what that means
Mm.
is the same brain waves that people who are under hypnosis are in. So for those first seven
Sure.
years, we're being
Sure.
hypnotized. We've been given our scripts to say, this is who
Sure.
you are. This is where you fit in. This is how we do things. Girls don't sit
Sure.
like this. Boys don't cry. And whatever, and all these other experiences that happen around us
Hlanganisa
that shape
amathanga.
these are all these things, right? And
Yeah.
the traumas that we see and the disruptions in the
Yeah.
families, whatever, all these sort of things, right? So it's
Yeah.
coming to an awareness that I am playing a role,
Mm.
and I
Mm.
am wearing multiple
Sure.
masks. I'm wearing
Sure.
multiple
Sure.
masks, playing a role. And for the most part, I realize that this role has not been in service of fundamentally me. It's been in service of
Mm.
me fitting into the narratives and the arc of the broader story so that I do not rock the boat.
Mm. Mm.
I
Mm. Mm.
play my part. So that's the awareness. The second thing then is to have the courage to do what we're doing in whatever, whether that is in therapy, in coaching, or just in whatever way a
Mm.
person may be. Just
Yeah.
reflect, have the courage to explore your
Yeah.
own self
Yeah.
now, to realize,
Yeah.
okay, I've lived for the world for the most
Yeah.
part, but who am
Yeah.
I? What am I? What makes me
Yeah.
happy? And then that opens the door to a much deeper and expansive world within. So it's going to
Sure.
be that awareness, that courage, and of course, that reflection.
Yeah.
And then the processing of whatever it is that is coming up, right?
Yeah.
You need to process those things and by those things, I mean also probably processing the ways that we have um, limited ourselves or
Yeah.
accepted the limitations placed on us by our socialization. So a good
Yeah.
example is this, like, for example, that women have been kept out of so many areas of commerce and industry and all these sort of things. And that's why there's so much now encouraging women to participate. So women in STEM is a good thing, right? Or women
Mm.
doing this or women doing that. Those were limitations that were placed on an entire group of
Mhm.
people based
Yeah.
on their sex, not
Yeah.
on their aptitude, and so on and so forth, right? So it's a similar thing. There are things that I have accepted that were given to me that have not even explored whether I'm actually
Mm.
interested in them or even want to do this, right? So it takes that
Mm.
kind of exploration and then begin to release that. Release it.
Mm.
This is not for me. Yes,
Yeah.
for example, as a Zulu man, I'm expected to have two or three girlfriends. It's standard. But is it really who I am? Is it who I am?
Yeah.
Do I really operate? Does it serve
Oh, the
me?
Zulu guys.
Right. Does it serve me, or does it serve
Yeah.
this arc of the story about what a
Yeah.
Zulu man is and what he does? Right?
Yeah.
And then I can begin to
Yeah.
make my own choices. Zulu men are violent. Zulu men, yeah, sure, because a lot of us buy
Mm.
into that story, but I don't want to
Mm.
buy into that story. So then,
Yeah.
the more you do this, and so the last piece of it is then you begin to be on a path of what I call spiritual sovereignty. You begin to become your own sovereign being. rather than, and you can still exist within the culture, but you do not have to be puppeted by the culture, right? So, and that becomes a whole deeper conversation about spiritual sovereignty. Yeah,
Spiritual sovereignty.
sovereignty.
Spirit. Yo, I don't know, guys. I mean, whoever's listening, whoever will listen, I want to take a moment and just pause at the genius that has just been downloaded, the wisdom that has just been downloaded. I think you said three profound things: the awareness, the courage,
Yeah,
the reflection. And I think the reflection being paired with being
yeah,
able to process what has just awoken for you.
yeah,
And through that, we wraps it up in terms of then, the journey to spiritual sovereignty.
yeah.
Sure.
Absolutely,
Yo,
absolutely. And Bongeka, these things are
sure.
not. I'm spelling them out as processes, but actually, they of course they are not. It's a model. They are very much intertwined. They are reiterative. So you go back and forth
Mm,
because when you, the
mm,
reason why you even need the courage is because to change, you're going to be confronted with enormous fears because you stand now to be different. You stand now to be an outcast. Bazothi abantu, "Usushintshile, usunje, usunje." So now you no longer fit in. So now you lose or you risk rather being part of, or rather being seen as no longer part of the in group,
yeah,
right?
sure.
And you see
Yo.
this at a group of friends, at a family, at work, at so many levels, even at intimate level partnerships. You
Mm,
begin to change, you're beginning to disrupt the narrative. Your change
sure.
is messing up my vibe because it means that I must also change.
Yeah,
So it takes an
sure.
enormous amount of courage to really wake up to who are you and who you want to be, and to be the person who is both the story and the storyteller, as it were. Yeah.
Sure. Wow. Um, I actually resonate with everything you've said, both from a deep personal level, and also from a practice level, as in as somebody who works in the people capability space, change management, as a change management practitioner, as a coach. This idea, I think, even in organizations when we try and deliver messages around change, and I think one of the grounding philosophies in our field is that organizations don't change. It's the people within those organizations that change, and therefore an organization is called, or therefore can say they've changed. And one of the first things we say as a model, a methodology, you cannot change until you become aware of actually what needs to change. So awareness is literally the foundation of any change that needs to happen. And something about courage. I posted something on LinkedIn. It was a reflection piece, but it even on LinkedIn, I think even on my other social media platforms, I was so intrigued by how many people reached out to me to say, wow, what a profound thought. This idea that I posted, that it really takes courage to be yourself. And I think, it's been something I was reflecting on based on some of the challenges I'm having professionally in my other personal capacity, where I'm leaning and becoming more and more of me, but I'm losing people in that journey, right? Or I've lost people, a lot of people. And I'm clashing, because and I think that was the reflection to say, I don't think you guys always say the statement, be yourself, be authentic, but I don't think we understand the cost of actually being yourself. Because when you really be yourself, you're going to piss a lot of people off. The gatekeepers, you're going to piss them off.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so courage then becomes the thing that almost becomes the torch to keep continuing to be yourself, because actually being yourself is a very lonely journey. And I don't think we talk enough about that, because I even wrote as in that reflection that society rewards sameness. They don't reward outliers. Maybe outliers are rewarded when they become, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately, when when they become billionaires, because that has become the matrix, which is very sad. The matrix at which we ascribe worth, we ascribe greatness, but on the normal everyday, you are rewarded for being the same, for thinking the same, for dressing like everybody else, for as a Zulu man, for being the same as every other Zulu man. The minute you say no, actually I'm not ticking that box, you will be challenged. So I resonate, and the idea around ongoing continuous reflection,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, this ties back to, in a way, and we can tie it back to the way we began with this conversation about what is identity, and this idea that that it's a story, right? And so
Mm,
I think that one of the reasons why change is so challenging for so many of us is it's precisely this point that we are also so interdependent. We are so
mm,
woven together so that
yeah,
when you change, it ripples, and now it raises questions about our relationship, because now it's
yeah.
like you've changed the algorithm around
Mm,
which we were connecting, right?
mm,
Now that
yeah.
you've changed the algorithm, it means
Mm,
that I can't stay the
mm,
same as well. So then, in other words, when you change, and
mm,
when we first, let's say, first met, we clicked
mm,
because we were, let's say, running the same algorithm. We
mm,
saw things the
mm,
same way,
mm,
whatever the situation is,
mm,
and we kind of found superficial sometimes points of connection. Now you
mm,
change. So
mm,
you deepen your algorithm and you go deeper in this. And now it's like you hold up the mirror for me, in a sense, to use another
mm,
metaphor. Now it's like I'm changing, um, and I'm not changing because I think I'm better. I'm changing because I am allowing myself to
mm,
change the story of who I am. There are things that no longer serve me. I'm
mm.
dropping them, and I'm now unlearning and learning new things. But
Mm,
now, when you do that, I feel insecure because now I
mm,
realize that you're no longer reinforcing some of my own narrative and my own identity.
mm,
So
mm,
now, instead of taking the invitation and the challenge to say, you know what, that's really cool and interesting that you're doing
mm.
it. Wow, tell me more. Now I want to break the mirror
Yeah,
down so that I don't have to
sure.
change. You see, and
Yeah,
that's why I think why this change thing becomes so complex, and where there's so many ruptures is because,
yeah,
again, what it is that when you change, you're now changing the story that we
yeah.
have been telling each other about who we are and what we think we are. And so I
Mm,
think a lot of people, when it comes to this identity thing, although they may not think consciously of it this way, I think a lot of us
mm,
practice it, right?
mm,
Practice
mm,
identity almost as if it is a fixed stain.
mm,
Whereas it's not a fixed stain. It's
mm,
almost like an amoeba that shifts, right?
mm,
And so in ever
mm.
so slightly may shift over time, and our bodies
Yeah,
keep score. Of course, there are things that, and age, I think, is a good indication of this. There are things when you're younger that you can do that you can't do when
yeah.
you're older, in your 70s. Your identity has changed,
Mm,
precisely by being losing the physical ability to do certain things.
yeah,
It changes,
sure.
right?
Yeah,
But people are so resistant to it when it
yeah.
comes to these less tangible markers of change. That's where
Mm,
often the thing is. Sometimes
mm,
it's some of these less tangible markers, there's a lot of resistance. Or in those markers where there's been a lot of
mm,
investment around people's security and gatekeeping. You can't wear this, you can't do this, you can't do that as a man, or as we've talked about it early on. So
mm,
either way, it's a contestation. It's a battleground. Identity is
mm.
a battleground. Yeah.
Sure, identity is a battleground. Sure. You know, I want to add, not add, sorry, what's the English word? Ugh. I want to expand, maybe that's a better word. And again, the audience, if there are any questions, please feel free to be start popping them, because I think we're drawing close to the end. But because you've introduced the language around technology, for lack of a better word, the language around algorithms. And I think one of the things I was also meditating about or thinking about as I was preparing for this conversation was this rise or this dominant voice around artificial intelligence, right? And almost every, especially if you're on LinkedIn and especially if you plug into, I mean, I suppose even not just corporate spaces, social media is inundated with intelligence videos. I don't know if you've seen these videos where they literally look so real. There's even people who've actually complained, like certain celebrities, where AI has used their voice to request money from people, right? But I think what concerns me the most, and I've had a similar AI conversation, but it was talking about the rise of AI and the role of literature and what would that look like? Because as a thinker and the creative process and the ability to, I think that is still one of the most brilliant things, the ability to think your own thoughts and being able to translate them. I think it's brilliant. Fine, I agree that AI should take away certain mundane tasks, but I think there's still the creative process that is critical. But anyway, the point I'm wanting to drive at is the comfort that I'm seeing in the world around this idea of AI, but also almost coinciding with, I mean, I call it an artificial identity, right? Where people, and we will probably come at a time, maybe not now, maybe the kids will look at this in 30, 50 years when we're old and 70, or maybe we've even left this earth. They would laugh at this question because it would have been answered by then. But I don't know if you've ever had thoughts around the rise of artificial intelligence and what that could potentially look like for the human race. Um, for me, I'm thinking of it as this idea around artificial identity. And the reason why I say that is I notice a lot of artificial identity in terms of how people show up, particularly on social media. And it goes back to what would make me look most appealing or most acceptable. So you find that, people show us a particular lifestyle, show us particular achievements. But if we know some of these people, we're like, "Siakwazi," we know that this is not actually the thing. But I think the reason why I'm bringing the two together is it almost seems that we are being more and more comfortable with the idea of artificial intelligence. And I think that's very systematic in terms of how we are being wired. Because as we become more comfortable with this idea that we're going to live with machines are going to do things, I think there's also a rise of this idea of being okay with an artificial identity. And I don't know, I know I'm sounding maybe not as clear
No, I
because my
get you.
thoughts
I'm following you.
trying to, yeah, but I don't know if you've been maybe interfacing or thinking about this world
Yeah.
around artificial identity and artificial intelligence. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think that, again, we we are okay with certain things until they threaten our sense of self or sense of identity, right? So
Mm,
I think certain types of so-called artificial intelligence, um, people are okay with it. Like it's okay when Google can sort of predict what I'm trying to say and kind of complete the sentence for me, so I don't have to tap up. I can just like click there and it write the sentence for me. But what I'm not aware of at that time, in that moment, is that the very thing that I am using for this convenience, the more I use it, the more I rely on it, the more I become dependent on it. So every time it's easy for me, or we are being enticed in many ways to rely on artificial intelligence to do certain things for us, right? A simple example that I gave. But when it comes to, so in other words, we are happy with artificial intelligence when it is a servant, right? And when we can put it to use again to further serve our interest, to use the term that you use now, the phrase of artificial identity. So I can use all this
Mm.
artificial intelligence, use the filters, use everything to curate a lie about who I am. That's okay,
Sure.
right? But I'm
Sure.
not
Sure.
happy. We are not so happy for the same artificial intelligence to write our literature, right? Because we think
Mm.
this is our preserve. We think that this is something that is
Yeah.
uniquely human, right?
Human.
So
Mm.
now we want to
Mm.
protect the identity of what it means to be human. Because if the
Mm.
AI can do it and do it better than me, so then
Separate to me.
what does it
Mm.
mean about me? So now
Yeah.
it's come back to holding up that mirror. It's like I'm not as
Sure.
important. I'm not the center of the world. I'm not the center of the
Sure.
universe. I'm not even. AI has taken it over. So then it becomes a question of my identity or our sense of self and
Mm.
identity as human beings is under threat,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
we want
Sure.
this thing to be servants to us, but we don't want it to be better than us. Now, cool. Now, where has that happened in history? Oh, snap. Racism. Racism.
Sure.
Right? So these
Yeah.
people, because they look like this, we want to say this is what was meant for them. This is their station in
Yeah.
life. They can't do this, they can't do that. Right? And the whole
Mm.
history of our of racism then comes up, right? And
Mm.
so it is no similar. It's not that dissimilar to what's going on here. We've created the intelligence, right? It's a supposed artificial
Mm.
intelligence, but we want to control it, and perhaps for good reason.
Mm.
There may be very good reasons to
Mm.
control. What I'm saying though is that we are replaying a
Mm.
particular story here. It's a same
Mm.
narrative that we as humans have played with each other, of limiting each other
Yeah.
and of control, of defining who you are and
Sure.
what you are. We now want to define the parameters of this thing that we've created. So I'm just
Thing.
saying we're playing a similar story. Now,
Similar. Sure.
here's a different perspective. What if we as human beings are artificial intelligence? What if
Mm.
we are created by a bigger force, certain gods? Doesn't the
Mm.
Bible say, let us create
Mm.
men in our image? What if we
Mm.
are
Mm.
artificial intelligence to a higher
Mm.
race, to a higher intelligence? We could be
Sure.
artificial intelligence. So I
Sure.
sometimes think of us
Sure.
as hybrid
Sure.
beings, as biospiritual
Sure.
beings, and our bodies are
Mm.
biospiritual technology, right? Do you see what I'm going with this? So again, from a higher perspective, we were created in the image and in the likeness of something higher than ourselves. And what we're doing
Sure.
here is we're playing out the same narrative.
Yo.
The artificial intelligence that we are is creating other artificial intelligence, or rather, I
Havo.
should say, that we may be. Let me not make it such as a definitive statement and offend a lot of people. But the point being that we
Yeah.
ourselves,
Mm.
these so I often think of us as human beings, as I said, as bio spiritual beings. There's an aspect of us that is biological, and scientists will tell about evolution, all of these things, but within that there is something that lives on beyond this vessel.
Mm.
And that again links back to this thing of spiritual sovereignty, because we are spirit beings having a human experience in these bodies.
What do the
But
young
we
people say? Drop mic.
You see what I'm saying? So there's that to consider too. So yeah, we could go
Sure.
on, but let me leave it there. Yeah.
Yo. Ungehlule. Okay, sorry. To those who don't speak isiZulu, how do I translate that?
I'm
Um,
defeated.
defeated.
Without a fight. Without a fight.
Without a fight. I'm just defeated.
Yeah.
Yo, there's a lot going on for me right now. There's a lot. But to try and contain myself, number one, I think you just did such an incredible, I don't know if but maybe you didn't notice, but for me, I think maybe it's also the coach in you did such an incredible thing for me, where you held the mirror back to me. The thing around Bongeka. you, again, I know you were speaking in general, but
Mhm.
for me, it was a reflection back when you were mentioning about so we can be gatekeepers, history repeats itself. And I was like, perhaps there is something going on for me in me that I need to interrogate to see how come I'm comfortable to use artificial intelligence in other things. And I'm like, yeah. But other things I'm like, no, this is my space. And this is for me, whew, there's a discomfort that happened. And I'm like, that's why I said you just held the mirror back to me,
Yeah,
because I keep meditating on, and clearly there's something in my subconscious that's
yeah,
going on around that. And then you mentioned a bomb, which I think is again a term that I don't think many of us, and I love the fresh language you brought to it, to say, what if we are a form of artificial intelligence, and
yeah.
referencing scripture, let us make man in our image.
Mhm.
And I think what I love about that, and I remember having this convo, I think must have been my sister or one of my siblings or a friend, I don't remember, about how as humans, especially in this flesh, we have this complex that we are the most important in the universe, not just the earth, in the universe, right? And I remember saying, but what if there are other beings? What if there are other living entities, right,
Mhm.
in the
Mhm.
universe that we don't know, because we almost have this thing that we are the chosen planet.
Mhm.
And even on earth, fine, I understand there's even a scriptural reference, let us make man, man will dominate, and how we don't, even the way in which we coexist, I feel sometimes we have a disregard of nature. We don't take care, and I have an issue around that. We don't take care of planet Earth in the way that we really should. Like, and I remember I talk about some of those things in the book, like simple things like, you know, how do we show our appreciation for Mother Earth as we inhabit this earth, and make sure that we leave it still green and fresh for the next generation, because we're
Mhm.
not going to be on earth for long.
Yeah,
So I don't know, for me, this thing around what if we are another form of artificial, it's just the bomb. That's why I said I'm left
yeah,
defeated.
yeah, yeah. Here's another, and thank you for that. But here's another perspective, and I think this is again goes to this question of identity. What you just
Yeah.
said, is how we as humans think we are the best thing since sliced bread, and and we really think, and so that's an identity thing. So it's an
Yeah.
ego thing, right? That we have as
Mm,
human beings. But it's funny, right? Because when it comes to really demonstrating our superiority, we really struggle.
mm,
For instance, consider
mm,
this. Um, ants seem to cooperate far more better than humans do to achieve what they need to do. They just do it.
mm, mm,
Bees can
mm.
create some of the most complex structures and they know how to do, but we can't. Or rather, we seem to struggle with it in the ways that these supposedly other forms of life that have far less intelligence than we can't, or do, or
Mm,
able to
mm.
achieve, right? And so
Yeah.
I think that when it comes to really what we should be more focused on, right, and dominating nature and dominating um, other
Yeah.
species, we should really learn to have dominion over our own selves. I think if
Mm,
we can
mm,
learn to have dominion over three things as human beings, the world will change. So it's not about
yeah.
dominating the outside world or dominating having power over people, but how can I have dominion, sovereignty over my own thoughts,
Yeah.
my own feelings, and my own conduct? And how can
Sure.
I begin to change the narrative again that has been force fed with good intentions sometimes from
Yeah.
culture, family? If I can take care of that and learn to
Yeah.
live with the understanding that these are really the three things that I can actually control and have dominion over: my own soul, my own spirit, my own
Mm,
sovereignty about maybe things will begin to look differently. Maybe then we'll be less concerned about, other people, whether gay men wear certain attire to appear. Maybe we'll be less
Yeah.
concerned about that because
Yeah.
we will be at home with self.
Mm.
You see,
Mm.
I think we'd be at home with
Sure.
self. And because we cling on so much to these outward
Mm.
markers of identity, because most of the time no one is home.
Mm.
Here,
Mm. Mm.
no one is
Mm.
home.
Mm.
So
Mm.
we
Mm.
must
Mm.
control other people. They must not do that so that I can be okay.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
So you see how fragile the identity is, the
Yeah.
sense of self. It
Yeah.
requires other people to, for me to be okay, other people must do or not do. It's a very
Yeah.
fragile sense
Sure.
of self. It's a very fragile sense of identity.
Sure. Oh, profound. I suppose the journey home is one of the most difficult ones, and perhaps that is why um, the knee-jerk reaction is to look out, right?
Yeah,
Because the journey home requires intention. I think you would know a lot
yeah,
of us who've started the journey. It's a stripping. It's hard. It's bruising, and also you don't walk in victory every day. There are moments where you think that how Maramina, I've made versions of myself that I that I never thought, Bongeka, you did that. I mean, because again, and you have to confront that version because you had a different picture of things I would never do, things I am, and
yeah,
then you do things and you're like, I did
exactly,
that.
exactly.
What?
Yeah, exactly.
But the joy is to cry and weep in that moment to say, okay, cool. Now how do I return back to home? How do I return back to the self that I know is more authentic? How and then that sometimes takes being brutally honest with yourself,
Yeah,
and not concealing even parts. I mean, you can conceal, like to you, Buhle, I can conceal, but to myself I can't. I have to confront
mhm,
I think they call it the shadow work,
mhm,
both light and
yeah,
in me. Sure, but it's a profound. What you just said is so profound for me. Yeah, I don't know if there are any. I know we're probably nearing our we are, I mean, in our closing time zone, but I don't know if there are any particular concluding thoughts from you. But there is a comment there. Apparently, they said I must invite you back because
okay.
Dr. Buhle is brilliant. Well,
Oh, wow, thank you.
guys, come on, it's me. Of course, I know brilliant people. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But I'm kidding. I'm kidding. That's the me, the
Yeah,
silly me, identity me. But I don't know if there are any concluding, cementing points or thoughts that maybe, or anything that you would love to leave our audience and anybody who's going to listen to this when we share it on our social media platforms, the
yeah,
conversation post this live. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you. Um, difficult one, but maybe let me say this, that you know, at least based on my life experiences,
Yeah.
if there anything to go by, I think that this question of identity
Mm.
actually also becomes a pathway and a doorway to multiple deaths,
Woo.
in the sense that so many things have to die within
Mm.
us to really come to know the essence and truth, because
Mm.
from the time we are born we are given scripts and roles and narratives about who we are. And if we are going
Mm.
to, and so therefore by the time we're teenagers we are
Mm.
anything but at we are probably the furthest away from this phrase again from scripture, know thyself. We don't know
Mm.
ourselves, and then many of us continue on that path. So I think that the
Mm.
question of identity, if we can hold it as gently as we can and as an
Mm. Mm.
invitation to
Mm.
as an invitation to a path of being a warrior who is willing to die to so many things that they are not. So in order is to get to the essence of who and what we are, we would have done ourselves a great deal of service, because you've probably seen a lot of some studies where people talk to people who are very old, and then they
Yeah.
give you a list of things that they wish they knew or did, and a lot of those things, if you look at them, people don't wish that they had added things, but it's often wished that they would have maybe removed things that would have made them connect more with who they really, really are. The
Yeah.
thing that I really should say, but I'm fearful of saying. The thing that I really want to do, but I'm fearful of doing.
Yeah.
And so this is a very, I think, important conversation. We can have it next time or another time to really understand that the question of identity is a question of peeling illusions so that we can really get to the core essence of what we really are as, I suppose, infinite beings of light having a human experience. And it's not about escaping the world, but it's about finding a particular way of being in the world. And in that, from that place, figuring out what we are, figuring out our gifts, and then giving them away. As Pablo Picasso would say, figure out what your gifts are and give them away. Because it because somebody needs them out there. You see what I'm saying? So it's not about hoarding, it's not about adding on, it's about subtracting to get to the essence. And then we can really live in a very, very different way than we live now. I mean, the things that we sing in this country, for example, with the whole Commission Madlanga thing, it's about people who've built their identities around accumulation and greed. And now things are beginning to fall away because they were not based on truth, on light, on authenticity. It was plundering, and other people suffered enormously and lost their lives. So there's a reckoning that happens for all of us personally if we live the rest of our lives without really paying a lot of attention about who and what we are. So the question you've put before us, Siswami, is a deeply profound question because it moves beyond our address and what we drive and what we wear and who we work. It really comes down to who we are, what we are.
I don't like the fact that I'm facilitating this. I wish I could just take time to be quiet
Yeah.
based on the depth and the weight of what you're saying.
Yeah.
What I'm grateful for is that God is so intentional. um, yeah, no, God is so intentional. I think I needed this conversation. I am blessed to know you, Dr. Buhle. I am so blessed to have met you. And I think the audience, the community, you are a gem. You are a gem in our generation, and I deeply mean that from the depths of my soul.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Um,
Thank you.
yeah, in a world that over worships fame and money, um, we need voices, minds, souls, spirits like yours who are just pouring and sharing, right? And I'm grateful to, again, just to be a vessel to unearth this. And I want to say thank you. Thank you for indulging us.
Thank you.
I'm deeply grateful, and I'm so excited to everybody who's listened and who's going to listen. And I'm going to listen to this recording again, and I want to encourage yeah, because there's a lot that I don't think you can unearth wisdom in a second or in a minute. It kind of like you have to be listening to it over and over and over and over again. But thank you.
Thank you as well, Saswan. Thank you for breaking bread with me. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll get to do this again. And I'm sorry that we didn't leave enough time or any time at all for your audience to ask questions. But yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me the platform to give my gifts as well. And yeah, thank you for receiving it.
Wow. Guys, audience, my people, my community, thank you to all those who've journeyed with me and penned the vision thinking in full color. I see a typo on the title. Guys, the book is Thinking in Full Color, not thinking of full color. Thinking in full color, multicolored ideas for conversation. We should have used AI. AI would have written it. But thank you. I think I want to close it off here because, and also just take time to soak in. But yeah, I think you can reach and follow Dr. Buhle on and I think you're on LinkedIn, Dr. Buhle. You're
Yes, I am.
also on Instagram, right? And I don't know if you have any other platforms, but I'm sure if they Google you, they'll find you. But yeah, siyabonga, and also I guess guys can always reach out to me if you wanting to understand how to get the copy of the book, which I did say is the foundation of these conversations. Deeply grateful. So have a lovely, lovely evening, afternoon, morning, whichever part of the world you're in. But we're so blessed. May you all be blessed. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.